This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And welcome to the Libertarian Counterpoint. With me today is John Cameron and Mr. Richard Field. And we've got the discussion about the results of democracy, and we've had some interesting results, shall we say. And Richard, you've got some things to say about the election in Argentina. So let's go ahead and just get Richard right off the top.
Okay, yeah, this is Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. The election of Libertarian Javier Milei as president of Argentina is the kind of milestone that gives libertarians, classical liberals, and as Milei likes to call himself, anarcho-capitalists hope for the future. As the former regular panelist on this show, Doug Barbieri, who is now an expatriate living in Argentina, says, for the first time since Ron Paul 2008, I have hope that there can be a political solution, that Milei can prove that we can reduce the size and scope of the government like Ron Paul would have done. I couldn't say it better. We can analyze the 56% to 44% landslide election result of Milei over Peronist Sergio Massa from several different angles. The first is that the election is a ringing repudiation of the central governing philosophy of most all Western democracies, the idea that votes can be purchased and power obtained by giving government benefits to your constituents. As the incumbent economics minister, Massa cut taxes and increased government handouts in the weeks leading up to the election. In the past, that would have succeeded in buying him the election. But the voters, experiencing 140% inflation and a 40% poverty rate, weren't buying it. Milei's hardcore libertarian platform of eliminating a majority of government agencies, abolishing Argentina's central bank and replacing the peso with the dollar turned out to be a winning message, particularly among young voters. The second is the viscerally negative reaction of legacy media around the world. Milei destroys their narrative that big government liberalism is guaranteed to predominate in politics for the foreseeable future. They claimed that Milei is a clone of Trump. He's quite the opposite. Once you get past the in-your-face style that both use, there is essentially no similarity. Trump is a nationalist and protectionist. Milei favors unlimited free trade. Trump is an anti-immigration nativist. Milei supports immigration as long as the immigrants pay their own way and support themselves financially. Trump supports the failed war on drugs. Milei is in favor of decriminalization. Trump presided over a larger deficit than any president before him. Milei is in favor of taking a chainsaw to government spending. He even waved around a powered-up chainsaw at his political rallies to make his point. In short, Trump is an economic idiot. Milei is an economics professor of the Austrian school, the only contemporary school of economics that comports with economic reality. Legacy media even accused Milei of being a fascist. To that, I can only ask what self-respecting fascist would want to reduce his power by drastically reducing the size of government. All that said, Milei has his work cut out for him. His Liberty Advances party has a small minority of the seats in the Argentinian legislature. The powerful Argentine labor unions will resist his budget cuts in every way they can, including, as they've already threatened, violent demonstrations. In order to enact anything on his economic agenda, he will have to make deals with Argentina's center-right party, whose endorsement in the runoff was instrumental in putting him over the top. Libertarians in Argentina and around the world will have to welcome and applaud incremental change in most instances. Milei is a president, not a dictator. We wish him all the luck as president in the world. I'm Richard Fields, and that's this week's Report from the Fields. See you next week.
Thank you, Richard. And that is the interesting, what I found most interesting was the visceral reaction kind of the establishment politicians had to Milei getting elected, right? It's like, oh my God, he's worse than Trump, or it's this whole kind of, it's a disaster. Well, maybe, but Argentina's already a disaster. So what can they have to lose, right? Is the thinking. Can they actually, is there anything, had they not voted for him, they had more to lose than trying something different, right? Is that what is kind of a thinking, John?
Yeah, the reaction to it was the thing that also I found the visceral, the word you used. They called him hard right. They compared him to Trump. And then, they talked about mostly the hard right, compared him to Trump. They did a hatchet job on the fact that he has some clone dogs that he's madly in love with. And he says he spiritually communes with the dog that they were cloned from, and all sorts of other stuff. And I thought, well, I mean, you look at the quote unquote leaders that we have, and their behavior is at least that strange. And they believe in fantasy stuff, which is, that tariffs don't hurt consumers and that you can just keep printing money and there will be no downside to it, and that more government and less accountability somehow equals freedom. I mean, the stuff they believe in is by far crazier than, communing with a dog. I mean, I could get behind that, I'm pretty spiritually attached to little Sammy. But the reaction to basically brand him as something that he is obviously not, that he's the opposite of, like far right, like authoritarian. And then somebody said he's just a faux populist. And then I think it was Reason or National Review said, yay, that he's a faux populist. We don't need populists. We need, people who are going to cut down on the size of government. And so there is some hope. There's a couple of Supreme Court cases coming that might really spell the end of the horrors of the administrative state in our country. Even though I don't like the candidates, some of the right / non-left candidates that are getting elected other places, they're at least talking about doing some right things. So there is hope. And I think, in South America, people vacillate between really bad conservatives and really bad socialists. And so the fact that a libertarian is going to get a shot is a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. And I knew going in that the lead up to it showed how biased and full of lies, not only, you said legacy media, Richard, but even the new media, was branding him as a hard right, fascist, on and on and all these things that he was patently and observationally not. And so I think there's some hope, and I'm very happy.
Yeah, and I think
the place in Argentina.
The other good news is that he was able to pull off really an upset election, a come from nowhere election, in spite of the fact that the incumbent finance minister was dumping money, welfare benefits essentially, onto the populace just ahead of the election and cutting taxes, which of course the population, I think, finally saw through it. You can't do that and in any sustainable way. It's obviously going to lead to even higher inflation than 140%. And I hope that the United States can turn its Argentinian trajectory, and that's what we're on, around before we get to 140% inflation.
Well, unfortunately, we're at what, $34 trillion in debt. That inflation's, whether it hits 140% or it's just a continual 10, 15%, it's still going to hurt us. And, I just hope that us as libertarians can understand that he's going to have to make compromises, and we're not going to throw him under the bus the minute he does. That's my biggest fear, is that, it's not actually the mainstream media that actually I'm worried about. It's us. It's, we're not going to accept that he's got to govern a country that, 45% of the populace voted against him. So, he's going to have to make compromises.
Yeah, well, not only did 45% of the populace vote against him, but of his 55% or 56% majority, he got a lot of votes who were simply, I don't want to vote for the other guy. and that's fine. But his hardcore libertarian base is probably half of that, and he's going to have to make alliances with the center right, and that's not a bad thing. Macri was not a particularly bad president when he was president of Argentina. He wasn't able to get a whole lot of stuff done, but I think his heart is in the right place, and he'll support. Bullrich will support him. I think he'll have enough support from the center right to push some meaningful reforms, particularly in the area of trade deregulation and currency control, getting rid of the currency controls and that sort of thing. And that alone will, just freeing up the economy, will do wonders for the Argentinian economy. And he's also already, Milei is making nice with the people, with the other governments that he was critical of, like China and Brazil, who are obviously a couple of his largest trading partners, and that's something he has to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. He said, "We'll trade with anybody. We're just not going to make political alliances with China or any other communist country," and that's fine.
Yeah, those kind of compromises, as long as we have realistic expectations, I think that's a fundamentally good way to go. The Dutch far right has actually had an election, and well, they call it the Dutch far right. Anytime the media calls something far right, I'm kind of curious whether how far right they actually are, because we know the media is far left, and so if someone's centrist and you're a far extreme leftist, someone in the center is far right to you. So I don't know how far right this guy actually is or isn't. I'm not well versed, but Wilders, right, was elected in the Netherlands. Yeah, the Netherlands, and so it's got all of Europe up in a flutter, and everybody's panicking that the Dutch have gone far right.
Well, the Holland, I'm of Dutch heritage and have visited the Netherlands on multiple occasions, and they have an immigrant problem. But the immigrant problem is because Holland is a very, very strong welfare state. They provide welfare to pretty much anybody that needs it or wants it, and they have a huge influx of Arab immigrants who are living on welfare, having moved from Africa or the Middle East. And that's the kind of immigration, that's immigration being done absolutely in the wrong way. You're bringing in people who have ideals and religion and culture that's entirely different from the country that you're moving to, and the country that you're moving to supports you and supports, in essence, supports your culture. And so, the new guy in Holland is an anti-immigration person. That's how he made his name. And I can't blame the Dutch for voting, for being nativists in that kind of a situation. The problem, though, isn't immigration. The problem is supporting the immigrants once they get here, not allowing them to, or requiring that they support themselves.
Yeah, well, Sweden ran into the same thing. They welcomed immigrants with open arms. A lot of people that ended up here from the Middle East, and actually a lot from Southeast Asia, went through Sweden. And they got to Sweden, and Sweden is known as a welfare state and socialist. It's not socialist, but it does have a huge support network that the state, through very high taxes, pays for. And the Swedes figured out, we can't have, we're going to have a split model, whereas that new people coming here, that we're, being overwhelmed because we're a small country who need to become acculturated and learn a language and don't have any skills that are compatible, and on and on and on. Can't just jump in and receive the kind of support that we've given to third generation Swedes or fourth generation Swedes. It's just the money doesn't exist. We can't tax ourselves. We're not going to run huge deficits to support them. We've got to make some intelligent decisions. And so, it's like probably what we're going to have to do here with Social Security pretty quick, is we're going to have a tiered system. The people that are getting ready to die will get to keep the big money, and then we're going to have to start winning the rich people out of it, and then cutting back on benefits, and then moving in and privatize. So all the rest of that. And so it's going to have to be tiered. And I think I do see some positives, and the nativist thing can be seen as a negative, but absolutely necessary, as Richard pointed out, because the heavy welfare spending. But he's also despises the EU and all of their rules that are, destroying a very hardworking, very productive society by this top-down Central European model. And so, there are some positives to it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I
part
wish
of
him
that,
luck in some of it. Yeah.
part of that euro, despising the euro is despising the green agenda of the European Union. In fact, it's a parliamentary system, so he'll have to get the support of several other parties. One of which is a farmers' party, a party that's
Which is
made up,
newly strong,
which is strong, and Netherlands has been extremely draconian in essentially forcing farmers to go out of business, supposedly to stop cow farts, to prevent greenhouse gas emissions supposedly caused by agriculture. The farmers are up in arms, demonstrating, doing tractor demonstrations on the streets all over Holland. It's not being covered by the legacy media. Once again, you would expect that, but it's got a whole lot of people in Holland very angry, and he will have to make an alliance with them. And I think it's a willing alliance that he's making with that particular party, and that's a positive.
And the people of is it Holland, Denmark? I get it all confused. They are very much in support of the farmers. They have support. They have the farmers' backs, probably because of the country is so intensely. Weren't they the second biggest exporter of food, despite their tiny size and population, after the U.S.? So
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about second, but they pull way more than above their weight.
They punch above their weight. They punch above their weight when it comes to farming, and so and it's a huge part of their economy. It's like it's a huge part of California's economy that we totally ignore here as we make it impossible to be a farmer. So maybe.
And Argentina's economy comes right out.
Yeah, and isn't it Argentina sitting on the second biggest shale natural gas deposits in the world?
I'm not sure about second largest, but they've got a big natural gas deposit as well as a lot of lithium. So whichever way the energy thing goes, they're sitting in the catbird seat, natural resource wise.
I know we got James. I'll shut up here. I know we got a lot of other things to cover, so I'll go at least for now.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and move on. We're going to still immigration, though, because we're still talking about the consequences of democracy. And there's been riots in the last few days over in Dublin, in Ireland. And the reason that this got my attention actually had nothing to do with the riots. I saw the Prime Minister of Ireland actually give a speech where he said the government of Ireland is too white. Now, Ireland is 94% white. So, yeah, the government's going to be mostly white. And so now you're wondering why there's immigration riots in the streets, and I'm going, the people who are running this place have lost their minds. They've literally lost their minds. Where you've got a country that's 95% white, saying our government's too white. Well, yeah.
There's another issue in the Irish riots, and that is this: one of the first responses of the government of Ireland was to say, these were ignited or helped along by social media posts that are hateful or that are misinformation or whatever. And the government of Ireland is proposing laws that would essentially police the internet, social media sites in particular, in a much more draconian fashion than is already the case. We're not anticipating 1984. In Ireland, they're living 1984 by eliminating or by making thought crimes.
Yeah, and then there's sort of two sides to that. I mean, the Irish have always basically a country of a million welcomes, and because they had such massive immigration due to poverty and all the rest of that, and they know, even our Irish people going to England faced signs that said, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. way more than the Irish faced when they came to the U.S. No Irish need apply was a small minority because people didn't really care who you were as long as you work hard and there's plenty of room, plenty of land. But so they have a tradition of being welcoming people because of the fact that there were so many, it's like 15-18% of the population fled, and like 10% of them starved to death, and a whole bunch of them left because they didn't want to starve to death. So they're pretty open to the idea of culturally of having new people come in. But when people come in and basically instantly are handed the welfare state, it creates an awful lot of tension amongst people, especially when you have high unemployment and in the country, as there is, especially among young people. When you're unemployed on the dole and spending your dole money down at the bar, it's easy to get rabble-roused into burning some police cars and doing some stupid things. So idle hands are the devil's workshop, pure and simple. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sad for me that we see all these political violence is kind of growing, even though we kind of predicted it 3-4 years ago when we sat here on the show and predicted the growth of political violence. But it's still sad. And Richard brought up 1984. The New York governor is declaring plans for social media surveillance, and she's blaming this whole the current excuse. We'll change that. The current excuse is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict about the misinformation and hate speech for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but they've been looking for excuses to do this kind of thing for a long time. This is hardly news to us, right? This is just the latest excuse.
Yeah, I mean, the issue really is, do you believe in free speech or don't you? And obviously, the Irish politicians don't. The governor of New York does not. And it's kind of inspired by the fact that the United States feels the obligation to get involved in the Hamas-Israeli conflict. We have no business getting involved in that conflict. If we were not involved in that conflict, either as a wannabe peacekeeper or as an arms supplier to Israel, we would not have the people fighting in the streets of New York that we have now. It's because of our involvement and American taxpayer money going to the Middle East that the conflict comes home. And that's what's happening. It's, as Ron Paul used to say, you plant the seed and it comes back to bite you. He had a better analogy for that. But basically, we are reaping what we have sowed.
Absolutely. And where they tried to bring up and create, and I think that I'm just going to talk about the deep state. They're trying to manufacture this the threat of right-wing violence in the country, and they couldn't even manufacture enough of a threat to justify the stuff they're doing. So they're a lot of the things that were quote unquote right-wing violence-prone incidents are being pretty much proven to have been caused by FBI agitators and really entrapment. But this new thing, the Hamas v. Jews, has some weight to it, and a huge portion of a huge portion of the Jewish population, which is 2% of the population in the United States, resides in New York. And also there is a huge Arab immigrant population in New York. So you're sitting on a powder keg. What blows my mind is that how the liberal left can take the side of repressive religious regimes which are so anti-female, and like the Squad in Congress supporting Hamas. It seems strange to do that when most women in these countries have absolutely no rights, can't even show their face. So how do they connect that up? I'm not saying Israel is blameless. Anytime you have a religious state, whether it's a Muslim religious state or a Jewish religious state or an environmental religious state like we have in California, you're going to have problems because, you know, religion is faith-based, and you can have wacky ideas and nobody has to support them. So it's a powder keg. And the idea that you can control speech and control news and so control violence is just ludicrous. Although in England, when the IRA was going after it hot and heavy, the newspapers were just full of any rumor about it, any incident that happened. I mean, they were selling papers like newspapers used to sell with it, and they sort of made a tacit gentle ladies agreement that they weren't going to provide these people with a bully pulpit. And after that, it's not that they censored the media and didn't report things, but they didn't sensationalize them and lead with and have all these opinion pieces and all the rest of that. They just reported facts, and not saying they buried them on page 12, but they just didn't make their living off of it. And after that was in place for about a year, they actually had some meaningful dialogue between the IRA and the English, and they got some stuff done. So, you know, if legacy media and new media feeds the flames by you know, using this stuff as clickbait and selling ad space, it's going to keep going. Just is.
Okay. All right, John, we've got about a minute to say goodbye to Detroit's asset forfeiture racket. I know this one was a story you kicked over to me, but we've got a minute for it. So give goodbye to Detroit's asset forfeiture racket. John, you've got a minute.
I'll do it, or Richard wants to take it on. I know it's near and dear
Well,
to him as
it's
well.
not goodbye. It's justice sooner. They take your car. Now you don't have to wait 7 years before you can go to court to get it back, but they still take your car.
And they
No,
still
so it's
charge
like
you fees and all the rest of that.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
so
it's the thieves. The thieves are being reined in a little bit, but they're still thieves. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's the government kind of, you know, yeah, we're not doing anything wrong, but yeah, we're going to make it easier for you to get your cars back, your property back.
We'll give the stolen goods back sooner. That's all I have.
Yeah.
A little bit sooner.
I don't know whether they're because they have an $800 fee. They steal something from somebody, and out of the 2,000 incidents, 400 and almost 500 of the incidents weren't convicted of any crime, and almost 500, almost all of those were never even taken to court for a crime. But in order to get their property back, they had to pay an $800 processing fee and all the rest of the stuff. So it's kind of like a permit to build your house. I'm going to give you a permit.
Yeah, John, we are out of time.
Build your
Thank
house.
you guys for being here with me tonight. Thank you for watching, and please remember to love everybody, and good night.